Today is Dr. Namrata Sengupta. She is a scientist, science communicator, career coach, and advocate for equity in health and STEM. She works at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard as an associate director for the Science Engagement Policy and Advocacy. She's also on the board of directors of Asian Women for Health, the Innovation Trail of Greater Boston, and is one of the Kendall Square Association's emerging leaders. She also serves as the adjunct professor of science communication at Clemson University. Dr. Sengupta holds a PhD in environmental toxicology from Clemson University and a master's in biotechnology from Bangalore University, as well as a bachelor's of science in chemistry from the University of Calcutta. Thank you so much for joining us today. Could you start off by sharing more about your educational and professional journey that has led you to where you are right now?
Thank you for having me in this interview. Yeah, so I remember that when I was in school, like, K through 12, I just always loved science and especially biology and chemistry. And at that point, I thought the career path beyond school would be going into medicine. And I think like that's just medicine and engineering are just such two common areas. And this might be a common story you hear from many people who've been in biology backgrounds. So, but sometime like during that process, I kind of realized that I could actually pursue, my undergraduate degree in some other field, and I chose chemistry at that point, and made a decision by the time I was finishing my undergrad that uh, I will be going into research. So the path for me at that time was like to do a master's program, and I wanted to move into a more biology aligned program, like make a transition from chemistry to biology, and which a lot of people tend to do at sometimes I feel at their master's level, because chemistry does form a really good foundation. And yeah, so for my master's, I went to do biotech. And at that time, during my master's, I got exposed to a lot of like environmental health and public health projects through campus initiatives, through other programs I was participating in or projects I was leading. And so I took a pause, and instead of like immediately applying for PhD programs after my master's, I wanted to work for some time and see like what does working in public health project or environmental health projects look like. And so for 2 years, I actually worked at a really grassroots level nonprofit organization, getting that experience. And that experience shaped a lot of how I was looking at applications for PhD programs and what I was writing in my statement of purpose at that time. So that was my journey in India. And I landed up in US after that to do my PhD in environmental toxicology, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It's a very applied program. I could see that, whatever I was doing during my PhD, I could apply in a job where it would either be, at that point, I was thinking I will go into something more regulatory, like risk management or regulatory toxicology. And finally, like around that time, I realized that, I was enjoying, besides being in the PhD program, I was really enjoying science communication. It was a very up and coming field. And I thought that I would do it as a side thing, as a hobby, and got advice from some of my mentors back then that, like, don't be late to the game. If this is something you're really interested in, passionate about, you should explore it and see what it's like. And I began to dig in and realize that, oh, I could actually get paid to do science communication. So after my PhD, I was applying for jobs in environmental consulting and regulatory toxicology, but at the same time, I was applying for roles in science communication. And I happened to get a really cool job here in Boston. And that's why I moved to this part of the country and stayed. I moved from science communication roles in one organization to the next. I landed up at the Broad Institute back in 2018 and have been here for almost 6 years. And my career path has evolved here from science communication to more public engagement role. And now I have added more like science policy role in addition to public engagement. So I've been having an exciting time and being able to contribute to a lot of impactful projects in my career. So that's my career story.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So it's definitely seemed like there was a sort of idea of what you wanted to do in terms of science, and that evolved over sort of like a period of time. So you started off in sort of the chemistry side, is that correct? And biology, and then you moved to biotechnology and then environmental toxicology. So definitely a lot of things explored. So what piqued your interest in science communication? And for those watching and who don't know what science communication is, could you give a little insight into what that role looks like, or in general, or particularly in your job currently?
Yeah, science communication is, I would say, it is different than scientific communication, which is often like what scientists would do in academic settings or in research settings, that they would communicate about their science and their research to their peers, which is, through writing and publishing in journals, through conference presentation. But science communication essentially is different than that. Science communication is being able to communicate about your research in science to the general public. And I would actually define the audience more as non-specialist audience. So it doesn't have to be like, by general public, people tend to say lay audience. No, your audience members could be experts in some other field. They may not be biologists, but they may be mathematicians, and they didn't take biology classes beyond I would say high school or something, right? So I tend to call the audience as non-specialist or non-expert audience. So science communication is being able to communicate through different methods. People choose a medium of communicating science. Some people write, some choose mediums like social media to talk about, distill complex science and research through Instagram, through TikTok, or through, I would say, X or Threads and Facebook. And some individuals prefer like setting up podcasts or doing video production. I think what you're doing is a form of science communication. You're interviewing people with different scientific backgrounds and choosing their narratives to share with the general public through your YouTube channel. So you're producing these videos. So in a way, you're contributing to the field of science communication. So what you asked me the question about what piqued my interest. I didn't have the vocabulary that this was called science communication back when I was in India working at the nonprofit after my master's. But essentially what I was doing was like science communication or public engagement. I was communicating about, environmental policies and environmental science topics to different people, like practitioners, to the local public, to residents, to people in the government. And essentially what I was doing was like kind of public engagement with science or public engagement with health-related topics. And when I came to do my PhD here in the US, at that time, some of my grad school colleagues and I started a program called What's in Our Waters outreach program, where we would work alongside a high school teacher and go into high school classrooms as PhD students and teach high schoolers about what environmental toxicology or environmental science research looks like. What does it mean to be a scientist? How like research is really done? Like some part can be field research, some part can be doing the research in the lab, but how do you analyze data? How do you create a scientific poster? And then we would invite these students to come and present the project that we would do with them, come and present that at our university in front of grad students and postdocs and like professors. So I think like that was a really good experience for me to help other people get interested in a kind of science communication, and then also help the next generation of scientists get interested. So that was like really, I realized that this is something I'm excited about. I started going to like scientific conferences and realized that the part I was enjoying the most was when it came to presenting my data and talking about my research. And because I was in an environmental toxicology program and we went to science conferences, the audience would not just be people who worked in labs in research institutions. The audience would be members of from industry, people who are working in government or making regulatory decisions, people who are not necessarily only scientists from your field of work, but interdisciplinary. So that just was a super exciting opportunity to talk about your research, but like cater your message to whoever you were speaking to. Like, should I talk about the chemistry more or should I talk about the biology more based on who I was speaking to at my scientific poster? That again, I think was another moment that like, which was happening. And I was realizing every single time I presented and adapted my message or adapted my, poster pitch or talk for different audiences or even networking events where I would interact with people from different fields, made me realize that, oh, this is something I enjoy doing and maybe I should look into it further. And I think that's what I can recall as some moments through different experiences that added up to my interest, building my interest in science communication.
Thank you for sharing that. So I know when you were first mentioning your journey in your STEM career, you mentioned that once you moved into science communication, you felt like you worked on some pretty impactful projects. Would you mind expanding on what those projects are and sort of the highlights of your career? Yeah.
Yeah. I can name many projects, but I think the one project that I love to share is recently I was a part of a team at the Broad Institute that helped develop a science museum at our institute called the Broad Discovery Center. It's a free public science museum that opened in fall of 2022. And I think that I count as a really impactful science communication and public engagement project. Just to develop the stories and the exhibits, we partnered with so many scientists. We partnered with architects, artists, and different collaborators. The exhibits in the Broad Discovery Center showcase the research that is happening at the Broad Institute and our partner institutions. And it essentially like uncovers for the general public that how it is important to understand the root causes of human disease. So the exhibits are kind of curated around those disease areas like cancer, psychiatric research, infectious disease, rare disease, and such. And it was, I would say that was like a challenging science communication project because you're trying to like distill so much information related to years and years of research that scientists have put in, but then you're trying to crystallize that into simple but easy to digest and easy to like read in a museum setting exhibits. But no one person could have done it by themselves, so you need to collaborate, and that's I think the beauty of projects like that. While scientists were partnering with us to tell us and help us choose which stories would be really helpful to share with the public, at the same time, we were partnering with graphic designers who would tell us, you know what, this image would like go better with this particular story as a graphic. We were partnering with video producers who were helping film in labs and in other setting and like interviews of our scientists. Our architects helped us kind of design the exhibits. I would say that was one project where we learned so much from each other and people outside our immediate area of expertise or fields. And that's so much a reality of like, big scale projects where people get to collaborate with a variety of people in other fields, and you have to be fluent to like, know how to communicate with each other to come up with a product like that. But I think the most exciting part of that journey was getting to see in the last year and year and a half how the public have been engaging with this space.
Mm.
We've had, in just the last 1 year, we've had close to 5,000 visitors. We've engaged with, like high school students, middle school students, adults, patient advocates, international guests, delegates, people who have come to visit because their son or their daughter or their friend like works at the Broad Institute. We've had people visit because they were just passing by. They were here for Boston Marathon and just like happened to see the exhibits and came in. And you get to have those conversations with so many different types of people and understand what is their connection to science or what is their connection to human health and human disease. And why is everyone kind of excited about the potential for better therapies and better discoveries? So I would say that's definitely really high ranking as a project in my, experience, that if you think about impact.
Mm. Okay. Well, congratulations on that project. So you've mentioned that there were a lot of roles and a lot of people who helped in contributing to that, and you learned so much from interacting with them. So specifically, what was your role as a science communicator engaging with those different stakeholders?
Uh, a large part of my role, I would say, was kind of leading the project. So think of somebody who's needed to just be the translator in between different groups, right? So I was kind of the point person who was speaking to our scientists, our contractors, our architects, our artists, and like taking like a messenger in a way, like I'm taking the message from one group to the other, helping them understand why do our scientists need a little bit more time in or a little bit more space to explain this topic. Then going back to the graphic designer and explaining that like, why does this design have to go in this particular color scheme, and who do we need to credit? So it was an experience getting to work with everyone. And I wouldn't say my role there was just as a science communicator, but it was also like someone who understood different pieces and the needs of the project, and being a connector between these groups. But when you are a science communicator, I think like it also teaches you the skills to be able to communicate with different audiences. You build skills to develop, develop communication projects, but at the same time, you build skills to communicate with experts because you're helping distill very complex information such as research results, complex, scientific concepts, where you're engaging with experts. So you know how to communicate with them. but then you're also going back to the community, or you're writing about it, or you're talking about it, or you're working with people who help do that and communicate that to the general public. So you anyways, a part of being a science communicator is also being like a connector. You connect people with information. You may not be the person. It's amazing because some scientists are also great science communicators. They generate the information, the scientific results, and then they also have the skills to communicate effectively about it, which is something I used to do during my PhD days. But when you're a professional science communicator, like what I'm doing now, my job is to partner with the scientists who are doing the research and then help them communicate about that to people who are not from their area of expertise. So connector is the word I'd love to use here in this case.
That's so very important, and I love that you brought that up because I think we've definitely, with the pandemic, we've seen sort of a mistrust between scientists and like the general public. But then moving like aside from that, we enter spaces such as Kendall Square and we want to know what's going on with the research down there. And it's very exciting to have that presented in a manner that anyone can sort of come in and engage with the science and go back kind of feeling like, oh, I understand what's happening. This kind of piqued my interest, or just goes away with a little bit more knowledge about what's going on in that institution. So thank you so much for making that a possibility. And I hope more people can go to the Broad Discovery Center. It's truly amazing. So I guess moving into more about like your journey in science. I know you mentioned that you were very interested in science as a child. Was there anyone who's been an inspiration to you or some support that I think helped you in pursuing a STEM career?
Um, my mom and my sister have been very influential, I would say, in developing my interests in science and a career in science. And interestingly, neither of them are from a scientific field. And I was the only person within my family or my extended family who went on to pursue not just a STEM career, but also like an advanced degree in STEM. So I didn't have a lot of immediate support network within the family to guide me that this is something you should do next.
Mm.
But I did have immediate support within my family, especially with my mom and my sister, uh, even if they didn't know what should you do, but they were there to tell me you should do this thing, which was really great because if you have strong female role models very early in your early in your childhood who have such strong belief and trust in your abilities, you kind of develop that confidence, right? I think I also had amazing teachers in school who believed in my potential, who would say like, go for it, you should do it. When you think about role models, otherwise, people who sometimes role models can be people you like admire from a distance and you've never met them. Um, in that case, the two people whose career paths or career trajectories and life that I was following was a very famous cardiologist in India called Dr. Devi Shetty. As a kid, like I read his interview where I read something like he did cardiac surgeries for free for like children in need. And I don't know, at that time as a kid, that was just like very inspiring. And I kept saying that I want to be a cardiac surgeon. That didn't end up happening. And then by the time I think I was in middle school, I started reading in magazines about this woman who is the founder and CEO of a biotech company. And it was Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who was, and that was like big news and how like biotech was so new in India. And she started the company Biocon. So I think Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw was at that time like somebody who I was like thinking that, oh, wow, like this is really inspiring. So yeah, that's kind of like some of the people I think of, who had a strong impact.
I guess moving on to more of looking at the diversity in your field, so the first half of your educational career did take place in India, and then you moved here for your PhD. Or do you have any thoughts about the representation of women in STEM and sort of the aspect of diversity and inclusion in innovation in STEM and how that sort of progressed over your career, or if you saw any differences in that at different stages of your career? Sorry, I know that was a lot, so let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so I saw that change, like I went to all girls school. So growing up, in a way, it worked in my favor in building confidence, because all my science teachers, math teachers, uh, anyone around me, any student who's excelling in science or math, everyone was, like I could say women in science at that time. And after that, I went to college for my undergrad. I would say that I saw that that representation dropped with a, specialty in chemistry. Still, my cohort in during undergrad was 50%, uh, I would say, men and 50% women. And professors largely, like mostly, were men. Uh, but as I kept advancing, and as I told you, like, I moved to a more biology oriented career path. After that, I started seeing more women in biology fields, which was which is great. That is at least one field of STEM we know that there is a pretty good representation of women. But when you start looking at certain career profiles, like when you're in PhD years, but you're looking at the balance of like how many of your professors are men versus women, you
Mm.
start noticing that. Like, you may have a lot of other female PhD students, but then you start seeing, okay, like not that many women as tenure track faculty in my media department. But still, like, it was a pretty decent representation. But then you also start noticing other things, right? Like, especially when you come to the US, you also start noticing things like not enough representation of women of color within the cohort of like senior women scientists. So have I observed these things along the way? Yes, I have. Um, and I know that some of my friends who are in engineering fields or computer science fields have possibly observed more of that disparity, or has experienced that. Does that like answer your question?
That does answer my question. I guess it was more on sort of what the demographics of your field look like, and how has that maybe changed or hasn't changed throughout your career. So thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned that you see less women in positions of like either tenure or PhD, and less in other fields of science when we move away from biology. Is that correct?
I don't want to generalize that statement. I want to
Yeah.
just clarify something, that when
Right.
I came to my PhD program, I was a PhD student in the environmental toxicology program.
Hmm.
Most of my professors were men.
Right.
I had a couple of professors who were women, but that's not necessarily true in all fields. Like, for example, I work at the Broad, and I'm surrounded by a lot of geneticists and molecular biologists, and I interact with a lot of female scientists here.
Right.
So it's different in different like places,
Right.
uh, and it's different universities, different departments. The cohorts will vary.
Mhm.
But I did, like, if you think about like a field like science communication, what I'm pursuing now, or public engagement, the field is largely like, you see a lot of women in the field. So, but then do you see a lot of people of color, like BIPOC communities? No, we don't. It's so the, I think we just can't put representation in one bucket, like, because it varies so much with institutes, departments, with areas of expertise at career levels. So it's much more complex than just saying there's not enough women represented in something.
Right.
Um, it's much more nuanced. But there is data, like, there is data out there, which you can easily look up, of what is the current representation of how many faculty or tenure track, or how many professionals in C-suite in tech companies are women. It's all, the articles are out there.
Right.
So, but I know your question was more about my observation about my surrounding and its demographics. So that was kind of what I have observed.
Okay.
And I don't think I've been in many situations or spaces where I have felt like I'm the only woman,
Mm.
which is which is a good thing, because I've been surrounded by other women who are in STEM, in many of these career levels and career choices and educational fields.
Okay. Do you believe that diversity and inclusion impact STEM innovation? Is that something that you think about when you think of more gender equity within STEM fields, or more
Definitely, yes, it does impact. And I think uh, most successful innovation ecosystems, if you look at it, are like thriving because of when they've brought in diversity of not, and it's just not about diversity of gender representation.
Right.
It's all kinds, right? Like you bring in diversity of perspectives, you bring in diversity of like people's educational backgrounds and ideas and upbringing, like, other experiences. People have different experiences growing up in different countries, different cultures, different fields they have pursued. So that definitely impacts innovation and the success. And it helps like build stronger teams. It helps build like a variety of ideas and stronger collaborations. So it's very, very integral. And science doesn't look, the science or scientific fields don't look the same as it used to look like a few decades ago. So, and I think we still have so much room to improve and grow and continue to like put in the work.
Right. Okay. So you did mention that you had women in the spaces that you were working in and definitely interact with a lot of female and women scientists. And so um, do you think that has helped in sort of bringing more um, inspiration to like younger generations in terms of telling stories or sort of being that representation and role model? Was there any, um, yeah, I guess my overall question is, do you think that visibility of women in STEM sort of impacts the aspirations of like younger girls pursuing STEM careers?
I don't have any like evidence. Like I like to speak with evidence and cite
Right.
sources.
Yeah.
So this is a very like I feel I have to respond to that question in a very anecdotal manner. Like
Right.
uh,
Mhm.
because there I know there's a ton of literature out there which has like proven that impact on decision around like going into STEM has many girls are impacted by seeing role models
Right.
and other women in science. So it's just that I don't like if I was writing something like this, I would have cited the sources and had all the uh, relevant research lined up. But
Yeah.
I think I can speak from my experience and not like from the perspective of existing literature and research around this. I feel that it's not just young girls who are inspired by seeing other women in science. I think all of us kind of like, you just want to see someone who looks like you in positions where you want to be,
Right.
right? Like people, we gravitate towards ideas like that and news like that when you see, when there's a place where you aspire to be.
Right. Yeah.
If I want to be a senior leader in the future and I am seeing another brown woman who's like really successful, and others like, South Asian woman who's come from India and then made her career in the US and is thriving in a position like that, I would want that one opportunity to be able to speak to them or ask them, can they mentor me or read about their journey. So it's very natural that you, all of us, those who haven't seen, it's different if I was still in India, but since I'm here in the US, it's representation and everything looks very different, right?
Right.
So I would say that yes, I think it does impact. It gives you uh, inspiration. It reminds you that this is possible in some way.
Mm.
So I think it's important. And that's why like so many organizations that are meaningfully engaging in these experiences, like if you look at organizations in Kendall Square itself, uh, that are really investing resources
Okay.
in having women scientists or BIPOC scientists go into the community, go into classrooms and engage with the students. And who knows who will be inspired,
Mm.
right? So inspiration strikes in very interesting and amazing ways. So I think it is a responsibility of institutions, of individuals to kind of mentor and give back and do this kind of outreach so that your story might resonate with someone who you're not thinking about right now.
So you are an advocate for equity in health and in STEM. Could you share more on like what that exactly looks like and what you sort of do in that advocacy?
I think the most tangible example here is I volunteer with an organization called Asian Women for Health. And it's a local Boston based nonprofit that essentially is trying to advocate for more representation of the Asian community in healthcare data sets,
Mm.
because a lot of like biomedical and health related data sets are still largely like Eurocentric. And what the other thing that happens in some of these data sets is Asians tend to get put in one bucket, but the Asian population is so diverse. so many nationalities, so many languages, so many experiences, and so many socioeconomic levels. When you put all these individuals in one bucket, you will tend to have disparities in their health outcomes. For example, like, certain types of cancer you'll see higher incidences in some Asian communities, especially in some East Asian communities. Heart diseases and diabetes are significantly impacting South Asian communities. So these are like different types of health outcomes. And if we, as a country in the US, are not able to make policies that, or have healthcare
Right.
that caters to populations based on their different ancestry and population examples, then we will not have the right kind of health outcomes. So I volunteer in the organization Asian Women for Health on the board of directors. Of course, the staff is doing all the grassroots work, project management, and executing all the amazing work. But my role there in the board of directors is to kind of provide governance to the organization, provide like guidance to the staff and advise and connecting them to the right networks. So I think that work is important and it's very close to my heart. The other project that I'm also recently got involved in, and it's a project that is out of the Broad Institute and the Massachusetts General Hospital, our partner institution, is called the Our Health Project. Our Health is a project that is trying to have South Asians living in the US above 18 years of age to sign up for a patient partner project where you donate your sample for genomic data, and they're trying to understand why do South Asians have such a higher risk of heart disease. So if they have enough South Asians participate in this study in the US, then there will be clues and genetic insights that can give our physicians and scientists like an idea how the underlying genetics is possibly one of the root causes of such a huge burden of cardiovascular diseases. So that's, again, like a project that I really care about, and really hoping to see that, the participation increases nationally, and the project has just launched. So these are issues that I definitely want to lend my voice to and kind of help spread the word, especially I think like because each of us have kind of like a personal reason. I've had family members who've been impacted by heart disease. I know that I'm very confident communicating and navigating the healthcare system here in the US, but I also understand that people come to the US from different countries with different language skills and different communication skills, and not maybe everybody is able to navigate care and preventative care, which is so important in certain cancers. And hopefully like the work of Asian Women for Health and some of these other research projects can give more ideas and insights on how to improve health outcomes for these communities.
Yeah, definitely looking at healthcare, we can say that it's definitely built on a system or any institution really, but especially healthcare, it sort of upholds these systematic issues of like racism and sexism, and that leads to like different people being left out of data sets that are very important for research. So thank you for sharing that. I guess, what do you think that institutions can do? I know you're working for Asian Women for Health to specifically get more of that data and sort of bring about policies and um, this issue to light. But what would you recommend that institutions or organizations take in terms of steps to create a more either inclusive environment where these different groups are taken more into consideration rather than sort of an afterthought?
Yeah, I think I would say institutions are making an effort, at least the institutions I'm associated with or I am aware of, like, at a national level, like the NIH is running the All of Us project, which is exactly trying to tackle that by getting 1 million participants to, participate in this kind of like project where they could diversify the genetic data sets. But they're like at Broad, like if you come to the, like you've been to the Broad Discovery Center, but if anyone who's watching this visits our science museum in 415 Main Street in Kendall Square, we talk about some of these types of research projects. We explain to the public that this is what like our genomic data sets look like.
Mhm.
And it is not representative of what the world population looks like. And then we show them in giving them a tour of like different disease galleries and showing them what kind of work is happening. Like, for example, in cancer research, like a partnership from the Broad with some other research institutions here is leading the Count Me In efforts, where cancer patients anywhere in the US can participate and send their data and like help advance some of these insights. There are other projects we also showcase partnership with researchers in Mexico to like uncover specific genes associated with diabetes, which have only been uncovered in Mexican population, which otherwise was not previously found, since data sets are largely Eurocentric. So different research groups, organizations are making the effort on research. I know there are hospitals in the greater Boston area that have, or pharma companies in the greater Boston area that are associated with clinical trials, and they are trying to engage with grassroots communities and patient advocacy groups to help increase representation of participants from different demographics
Right.
to get better insights. So I know efforts are going on in different places at different organizational levels, and I can't speak for everyone, but at least like the examples I gave, many groups are trying, and it's still a very, very long journey ahead.
Mhm.
And the work has to keep continuing. We have to remain educated. We have to educate others, and you know, we have to work alongside our scientists and our administrators and our community partners. And at the same time, what is most important in all of this work is always, always, always including the perspectives of the patient community, including the perspectives of the public, and really understanding what their needs are, what is not being heard, and how can those lessons from them shape some of this work and policies.
Thank you for sharing that. Sort of going back to your STEM career, your career in general, and getting to where you are right now, what is some advice that you would give to your younger self?
Great question. I sometimes think about this question, actually. I think, if I could go back and give advice to my younger self, um, I would say, if I just like got a chance to speak to my 10th grader self or something, I would say that everything that I enjoy, I like doing, and I'm currently doing, as a 16-year-old, let's say, all of that will culminate into one day into something in my career. Because, I enjoyed creative writing, I loved art, I loved science, and I liked leading teams, I liked directing school plays. And I just thought that, why do I do all these things? Like, what is it? How is it going to matter someday? And then it mattered, because I think like all of those things uh, were retained in the way like how I pursued my career, and I'm utilizing all those interests, skills, and hobbies, and like just generally like it gets applied. So I always when I talk to people who are in high school or college, I always remind them that there's a lot of space for creative people in STEM. So, and I like the idea that, one of the things that you are trying to do with your interview series is like you're trying to bring discussions around STEAM, which is true. Like, bring in your creativity into scientific fields, and that'll impact so many things. The way you address a project, a complicated project, to the way you execute it, to the way you communicate about it. So all of that matters.
Thank you so much for that. And I guess moving from sharing advice that you'd give to your younger self, what advice would you give to the viewers watching this right now? And anyone in general who's thinking about starting their STEM career and where they want to go in the realm of STEAM.
Yeah, I think what I just like emphasize what I said towards the end of like, connecting the dots. I just mentioned that if you're a creative person and you think that, oh, do I have a place in STEM? You possibly do. Like, it's that's definitely one advice, which I already mentioned. I think the other thing I always, maybe this is a very common advice, but it has helped me significantly. So I like sharing it and reiterating it. If you're already aware of this advice, that information interviews go a long way. Just being interested about how did other individuals in STEM careers or STEAM careers find their path, um, can inspire you in interesting ways or open up different viewpoints. And you should never stop doing that at any stage of your career. Like, even if you think that you have arrived and you've like, you know, cracked that interview and have your dream job, even after that, I think it's just important. It like also helps you grow in an interesting way, like hearing people's perspectives. Um, so never stop doing that is my advice.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for all the encouragement and the support and for being here. It's truly been an honor to speak with you and have you on this interview.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And it was great fun speaking to you as well.